So it may be, I love the idea of it's a wonderful image of your grandmother and her pies. And if you and I were working together on writing this scene, absolutely. I don't necessarily need to know what your grandmother was wearing or what the weather was like or the color of the wall, or maybe. But I think, so what writers do is they write a little bit of everything because that's what they remember, especially memoir writers. Instead, I would focus on the pies. Really, what are those pies like? And what do the pies mean? What are you feeling in that moment? What is this moment like? This relationship with your grandmother is probably where the heart of the story is. So there's this rich moment of smelling the pies, great. But really, what I care about is your relationship with your grandmother and what you're thinking in that moment. What it's like. That's what I'd probably interview you if you hadn't yet written your scene, and that would be the heart of your scene. Not a little bit of everything. It's really, the scene is about this moment with my grandmother.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone joining me from a country that I have never been to or have had a guest from in over 500 episodes. This is the first time, so I'm really excited about this. As soon as you hear my guest and her voice, you're going to hear her smile, which is something I always love. So Wendy's here on the show, joining me from a country that she'll explain to you in a moment. But Wendy, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Dave. I'm joining you from Cusco, Peru.
Wait a minute. Peru? I'm in Canada and you're in Peru? Like, we are like so far away from each other. This is amazing.
Honestly, it's not that far. From Los Angeles to New York, it's about the same distance as from Peru to Miami. I mean, it's a little bit further from Peru to Miami, but North America is huge, so we're not really that far away. I think we're on the same times. Right now, I'm on Eastern time. Half the year I'm on Eastern time. Half the year I'm on Central.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Be so far away in the same time zone. That's great. I love that. It's amazing. What takes you to Peru? Like, how did you end up there?
So I lived in Peru when I was a kid. My father is a mining engineer, and it used to be owned by the United States, this copper mine on the southern tip of Peru, called the Southern Peru Copper Corporation. And we went there when I was a kid. And, really my first memories begin in Peru. So when I was a kid, I was practically Peruvian. And we went to the States in my memory for the first time when I was 8 years old. So I lived here as a kid, and it kind of feels like home to me. Now, I've lived in the States as well. I was born in Arizona. My parents are American, but I do have this affinity for Peru. It has, in a weird way, always felt like home because my first memories are of living in South America.
So we're going to plan a trip to Peru. We're going to do all the background work to come and see where you live in that beautiful country and part of the world. What would be like one or two things you'd say is like a must see, must experience, must try if we came to Peru? What should we do?
What people, especially where I live, what people come here for is Machu Picchu. Mm-hmm. So it's an ancient ruin from the Incan civilization, very famous. I believe it's one of the 7 wonders of the world, and we have actually lots of tourists coming to Machu Picchu. Nice. So it's one of 7 wonders of the world and quite impressive. And the history of the Incas is pretty interesting too. So.
I love history, so you got me there. And it's a beautiful place in the world as well, weather-wise and everything as well. So it's got to be gorgeous to be there.
The architecture is so gorgeous. Side history, the Spanish came here because it was the center of the Incan Empire and there was tons of gold. The Incans didn't care about gold. It was sacred to them. It represented the sun god. Well, the Spanish came and went, ooh, tons of gold. And this, where I live now, is the capital of what was once the Incan Empire. So the Spanish came here because that was where all the gold was. So as a result of that, the architecture here is beautiful Spanish colonial architecture. So you have the stonework and these arches. So it's really beautiful here. Yes.
I love it. So you're an author, but you do something amazing as well. You help authors. So that's a great connection for the listening audience for my show, Living the Next Chapter. So I have authors that listen to the show constantly. I have authors that are looking to write a memoir, and they don't know where to start. So having you here, Wendy, is like a dream come true because this is something you do. Can you explain to us through your website and what you do and how you help authors? What do you do as far as helping authors around writing a memoir?
So I help all kinds of people write a memoir. The process is the same whether you're a professional writer. I've worked with New York Times journalists. I've worked with people who've never written a word in their life. So the process is really the same if you understand how memoirs work. So what I do with writers, I sometimes writers come to me that've been working on their memoir for 25 years. I promise you, I've had people who've been working on it that long, and I have people who haven't written a word. So again, the process really is the same. Memoir is this really tricky beast. I think people think that, and I understand this. I thought this once that, oh, I'm just going to write about my life. I already have the plot done because I lived through this. And that is really not the case. So I thought this was once true, and I learned that what's so important is to have plot. So what memoir is it's taking what really happened to you and turning that into a story, turning that into plot. And that's where most people get off track. That's where I got off track. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is where I screwed up when I tried to write a memoir. So I love helping other people do this, write a memoir from the ground up, or finally finish that memoir that they have draft after draft and thousands of pages, that memoir, that manuscript they've been working on for 25 years.
Why is it important to write your memoir?
People, everybody, that's a different answer to that question. Now, people fall into categories. Some people do it. They reach a time in their life and they want a record of what they've lived through. Some people want to leave a legacy for their kids, for their grandkids. Some people want to understand what they've lived through, right? There's something really interesting in writing down your story. You tell yourself a different story. You come to a new understanding about the life that you've led. Ironically enough, in creating plot, in figuring out what matters to put on the page, you start to tell yourself a different story about the life you've led. So that's probably my favorite reason to write a memoir.
Okay. And the whole legacy idea as well, that's great because people want to capture their story and they want it to live on into the future. That's a great part as well, right?
I would also say, being a published author is a valid reason to write a memoir. I really focus on helping people write memoirs that other people want to read because it's great to leave. I've had so many people come to me and they're like, I wrote my memoir for my grandkids. Even my grandkids didn't read it. And my grandkids, and now I want you to help me. And now that I'm going to write a good memoir, I think I want to get it published. So yes, I love that as well. I really do think your memoir, it's about you, but I teach people to make it about their reader.
Okay, so how do we write a memoir that serves an audience? Because again, I could write about my own stories. They mean something to me, but they might not mean anything to anybody else in the world. Again, the whole idea about story and plot, I love that. We're going to talk more about that. But how do I write my memoir towards an audience and not just towards myself looking in the mirror?
There are two things. First one is affecting your reader emotionally. So you don't have to have this crazy otherworld story about these crazy things you did in your life. In fact, sometimes people really prefer more of an everyday story because they relate to it more. Both can work, right? But they need to relate to you. So part of it is in the writing itself. It's affecting your reader emotionally. So if you have this everyday story about losing your dog, you can, and it's well written and you transport me. The writing itself is good. I'm going to love that story. I mean, I love it. It may make me cry, right? But so part of it is in the writing itself. And the other part is in the plot. And big picture wise, it really is avoiding the problem, what I call the this happened, then this problem. So when most writers sit down to write about their life, they recall a bunch of stuff that happened to them. And that's where you lose your reader. So you need good writing and you need good plot. And good plot is avoiding telling me a bunch of random stuff that happened to you, because there's no suspense in that. I did this, I went to the zoo and I saw a rhinoceros. And the next day, my mother-in-law called me. And the next day, I had an argument with my husband. So it's just all this random stuff you're telling me. There's no story there. So plot is the solution to that. It's figuring out how to tell me a story that creates suspense, and that is how to keep your reader. So it's plot and prose, basically. I gave you a really long answer. I could have just said 2 words. Plot and prose is how to keep your reader.
So how do we keep our memoir from being very linear? Like, I was born at a very young age. I went to school. I did the thing, and here I am. Like, how do we keep it from just being a solid line that might not have that kind of ebb and flow of plot and story?
Yeah. Well, so people confuse autobiography and memoir. Most normal people like us are going to write a memoir. An autobiography is written by really famous people. And an autobiography really is, I was born in a log cabin, in 1955. And it starts there and how I became a success, and really includes all sorts of pivotal moments in that famous person's life. So presidents write autobiographies, famous musicians. Who's your favorite musician, Dave?
I just listened to, I like music. I play guitar. So Eddie Van Halen, his brother just wrote a book. Alex Van Halen wrote a book about Eddie and did an audio version, so I love it because you get behind the scenes stuff. I love that.
Yeah. And you're reading that because you care about Van Halen, right? Absolutely. So you want to know everything that Eddie Van Halen lived through, right? Yeah. So famous people can get away with that, but non-famous people, so there probably isn't a ton of plot in that book. To be honest with you. And that's okay. You want to know everything that this musician you love lived through. Now, if you're not famous, you need a premise for your book. So your book needs to be about something. It's not, I was born, in 1945 in a log cabin in Ontario, but rather you need to pick a lens for your story. So yours, I don't know, Dave, maybe yours would be my journey to becoming a musician or being a musician, right? So that would be, and that is already helping filter. It's already serving as somewhat of a filtering mechanism. So we don't have to know where you were born, and we don't have to know, about your siblings being born, and all. We might start with when you start to learn to play the guitar. So that's already helping to create plot. So the first step is understanding what your memoir is about. And people are like, well, I have so much to say. Write another book. That's fabulous. You can, so what would your second memoir be, Dave? The first one's going to be about being a musician.
Being a podcaster and talking to Wendy Dale from Peru. That would be my thing.
That's a whole book right there. Podcaster. Boy, a lot of pressure on me to be interesting here.
Well, you're already meeting that expectation. I love this. So autobiography versus a memoir. I love how you've broken that down because I think a lot of people don't get those mixed up, as you mentioned. And I think the one thing about an autobiography is that as a person who looks to autobiographies like Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen, there's equity. Like I'm already bought in. I already know things about this person. They're to me a famous person. So I've already put them on a pedestal. I know about them already. So I'm not being introduced the first time. They're a name. They're popular. So there's some equity, I would say, in that relationship. Whereas a memoir, I may not know this person. I may have no connection with them. And I don't know anything about their story. So it's going to be hard for me to make that as a purchase decision because I don't know anything about them, right? So I think maybe there's some equity there, possibly, between a memoir and an autobiography.
So you're saying you can be not famous, but there is this idea of pulling you into their world, of wanting to know what someone's life is like. Well, I've never thought of it that way. I like it, though. I think there's this idea in publishing that I don't agree with. That
okay, wait a minute. Whoa, I'm interested in this. Everyone, lean forward, everyone. Here we go, Wendy. Go, please. Come on. I like this. Good go.
I'm the punk rocker of the publishing world, Dave. I disagree with lots
All
of
right,
things.
let's do it.
All right. Well, one thing that a lot of publishers believe is that your memoir, what the theme of your memoir is only going to resonate with people who've lived through that same thing. So if your memoir is about domestic violence, 'cause in fact, they ask you in your proposal, what is your target audience and how many people are in that target audience? So if you're writing about domestic violence, you need to give numbers as to how many people are victims of domestic violence, because there's this very short-sighted idea in publishing that only people who've been or victims of domestic violence are going to read your book. And I don't feel that way at all. I think when I admire writers who can pull me into a world I care nothing about. A good memoir that's well done, like, to me, the most boring thing in the world would be maybe golf. I don't know, like, really, I'm sorry, any golfers out there, but I don't play. What does it talk about? A good memoir about golf? Wow. So good writing can do that. I think that it can let you into a different world that you know nothing about. So that's what I think memoir is really exciting.
That's a good test. And again, I'll go back to the musical lens you put on a memoir. That also then helps to identify your audience who'll be interested in something music related as a reader, right? They may not know me, but they see something about the music side and all of that. And they're like, well, I'm a musician, so I already have a relationship before I even purchase the book. So that also helps. In podcasting, we talk about having your niche. You would say in the US, Canada, we say niche. But picking your audience, your area of focus, so that you kind of, not that you want to eliminate people, but you want to focus in on the people that would be best served by what you're writing, or for me, podcasting or music, the type of music you record. You want to focus in on that area. Everybody's welcome, but I'm really making it for this select group of people so that I can reach them.
Absolutely. I hear you. You are appealing to writers. Your podcast is probably not going to appeal to cross-stitchers. There might be some crossover. There might be some cross-stitchers who also write. Yes, but I hear you. The topic is writing. I do feel like memoir is a little bit broader, though. For instance, Wild. It was made into a movie. I don't think the only people who watched Wild were hikers, right? So I think there's broad appeal there in many cases, because it is a story. When you do it right, when there's a story, it's not just going to appeal to people hiking the PCT. And that's how I think publishers are sometimes too short-sighted. It's like, how many hikers are there? Because only hikers are going to buy this book. Well, women might buy this book because they identify with a strong woman with a goal. So sometimes the appeal can be broader.
I love how you're doing this, Wendy. You're unpacking things and repackaging it and giving it back. And I love how you do this. I can tell you've done this before. This is great. So I'm a memoir author. I want to write a memoir, and I'm looking for resources to help me in that path and that journey. I don't know anything. I'm here first time. I saw the episode title. I saw your name and went, I think that's the Wendy that helps people with memoirs. And it's you. It's really you. So you have this new audience here listening, and they're at the very beginning stages. What's my starting point as a memoir author? Do I go and write everything and then go find somebody to help me? Or what kind of options do I have?
I will send you to my website. I have a 7-part class. So you can go to freememoirclass.com, and that will send you to my website, freememoirclass.com. And I have a 7-part video class that teaches you how to craft a memoir from the ground up so that you don't make structural mistakes. I have people who've been doing this for 25 years, and the reason they're not getting it right is because they're missing a step in the process. So I'll tell you what some of those steps are. I can talk a little bit about that, but it really is important to write a memoir. It took me 15 years to learn how to do this. So I deconstructed thousands of manuscripts in order to understand the principles that all memoirs rely on. So I'm really passionate about this because I've invested a lot of time and love into this. And partly because I struggled so much. I did it all wrong. Memoir is really counterintuitive. I think writing in general can be a little counterintuitive, but memoir especially. And so doing this in the right way will allow you to create a memoir. I say make your first draft your final draft. That's the subtitle of my book. I know that's the opposite. Again, here's the punk rock in me coming out. Common advice is just write. And I really hate that advice. Just write. Write a crappy first draft. I think that's terrible advice. Write a first draft when you know what you're doing. Learn the principles that go into a good memoir, and you really can make your first draft your final draft. I don't like this idea of writing. The common writing advice is just do it. That is terrible advice. You're a musician, Dave. How did you learn how to play the guitar? Did someone hand you a guitar and say, Dave, just play? So how did you learn?
I took lessons. I went to an expert who was better than I was, and they taught me how to do the thing I was meant to do. So, because they brought things out of me that I didn't know was inside of me, because I had never done this before. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. So I hate in the memoir writing world this idea, just write, and you'll figure it out by doing it. Yeah, if it might take you 25 years and it still may not work. And even then you're going to need an editor and probably multiple editors, and you're still going to need that help. But why not get the concepts in the beginning? I'm not saying that you need a live person. I'm saying you need the principles. So if you had not taken lessons, you would have at least watched a YouTube video. Back when we were kids, YouTube wasn't around, right? Gone to the library and gotten a book. Dewey Decimal System would have been hard. It would have taken forever, right? But you would have learned music, right? You would have figured out how to read music. There are principles at play. So I'm not saying you necessarily have to hire a memoir writing coach. What I'm saying is you do need to learn the principles, and that is something I'm trying to change. There are principles that go into memoir writing, just like when it comes to music, you learn how to read music, you learn the fingering, you learn how to play chords. I'm kind of out of my depth here, so if I get that,
keep going.
Today, doing the best I can with my music analogy here.
I like that. Yeah, it takes effort, it takes practice, it takes, for me, blisters on your fingertips because you're learning how to play this thing. A lot of frustration, a lot of dead ends, a lot of you think you're doing well until you see somebody else. That's one thing that I've noticed in music is I'll find a guitar player who's way better than I am, and that I have two responses. Either I'm going to give up because they are so good and I'm not, so it's not even worth it, or I'm inspired to do better because I see the potential that maybe I could do something good someday. So there's two ways of looking at it. I think for authors too, you might look at your favorite author and go, I could never do what Wendy does. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to give up. Or because Wendy did it, I know I can do it. So I'm inspired to do it. That's what I want to lean people towards. Don't give up. If you see somebody you admire, there was a day when they admired somebody else themselves as a young author. So you got to put in the work.
Put in the work. You really do. And what I believe is if you have principles, now it's like you said, it's like practice now. So now you're honing your skill instead of they tell writers to just do it. And so you're starting from scratch. Why not learn the principles and then within the principles, it's like learning the fingering and learning how to read music. Now you get better at it. Then you make really fast progress. So absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And be inspired by people.
So what is another structural error that maybe a memoir writer would maybe fall into that your coaching could maybe help them to avoid or limit?
So I tell you so I spent 15 years deconstructing manuscripts to figure out these concepts that all memoirs had, because no one had ever done that before. And I don't understand why. It's incredible, in this year, that no one had done that. And so it took me 15 years, and you're going to laugh. You're like, it took you 15 years to learn this. I'm already sort of a spoiler alert. Really, there are two components that memoir relies on. And those are, do I get a drum roll, Dave?
There you go.
You're a musician here.
There you go.
It's 15 years. It's only two words, right? It's scenes and transitions.
Okay.
And those are your two components. And so getting structure wrong is when I see there is information. If you understand how scenes work in your book and how transitions work in your book, you know what information goes into which. And if you mix it up, you have structural problems. It took me 15 years to learn this, right? But it's really powerful if you understand how to use your scene in the right way and your transition in the right way. It also answers a lot of questions for people. So, I want to explain my relationship with my mother. Well, where does that go? Well, if you understand the rules of structure, you know where that goes. And so people a lot of times are asking themselves the wrong questions. Sometimes the problem is in the question itself. How do I use a scene to explain my relationship with my mother? Well, that's kind of the wrong question to ask yourself before you write a scene. So understanding, it really does come down to these two components, scenes and transitions. And if you know what goes into a scene and what goes into a transition, you won't have structural problems.
Okay. All right. So talk to us about your recent book and kind of how that ties into your coaching and how you help authors. What is the big idea behind your most recent release?
It really is the biggest. I gave away the ending of the book. So, yes. Oh, the memoir engineering system, make your first draft your final draft, really is that. It's that you have scenes and transitions, but it teaches you how to use a scene. What is a scene doing for your book? How to use a transition. What is a transition doing for your book? What it looks like when you don't use them in the right way. So there are lots of examples for people to hopefully recognize that they're making these errors. And then there's a 6-step process for how to structure your memoir, how to create your memoir from the ground up with no structural errors. If you do it in the right order and you use your components in the right way, you can make your first draft your final draft. That's not to say that you're not going to finesse the writing, but you're not going to have to do draft after draft. You'll tweak the writing. Absolutely. That's after you get the blisters on your finger and you make the song sound better. Right. But what I want people to learn the principles first. I want people to learn to play music and then get the blisters on their finger and then make it incredible. Right. So that's the rewriting process. But you're not throwing out. Well, it killed me as a writer when I would write. I love words on the page. Probably the same way. The sound of music. Just the words on the page I just love. That's what I love. Plot is difficult. Plot is logical. And I've never found that very fun. But I'm really passionate about it because that's where I screwed up, when I didn't understand how it worked. So if you do this tiny little investment in your book, now you can write knowing that you're not going to throw it away. So when I was writing, I would throw out so many pages that I loved because they didn't advance the plot. So I was doing draft after draft, and it's so painful to part with these beautiful pages because they don't advance the plot. The famous phrase, kill your darlings. But it's too painful for me, so I'd rather not write them in the first place. I'd rather know that what I'm writing is actually going to go in the book, and then my focus is on make that writing better and better and better because I'm not going to throw it away.
What about authors that get caught up in the details? Like they're super detailed in what they're telling you, and almost to the point where you're like, as a reader, you're getting lost in the details. And you're like, why do I need to know what color that was and what temperature it was and what you had to eat for breakfast that morning? I don't get how I need to know this to carry the plot through. Can we go too heavy in details or even too light in details? Where's the balance?
Well, here is where I'm not a big fan of lots of description. My memoir is actually a travel memoir. I think I'm like, maybe, I don't want to say the only travel memoirist in existence who has like no description in her book. That's not true. There is a little bit. But, usually travel memoir, you're describing a place in detail. I find lengthy description boring. I found a lot of details boring. I think there's some bad advice out there, and I think that it gets writers off track. And part of it is to be very descriptive, to include lots of details to help your reader visualize what is happening. And I disagree with that. I don't think your reader needs to visualize everything. I think they need to feel everything. So I say that memoir is not a visual experience. Reading a novel is not a visual experience. It's an emotional experience. And tons of detail actually weighs your book down. So what is actually more interesting is to affect your reader emotionally. And the way to do that is to put us inside your narrator's head. So to give us the narrator's thoughts, and that actually makes you feel what the narrator is feeling. So I call this subjective writing. This is also part of the book if you're interested in learning more. So yes, I don't like those, what you're feeling, Dave, all that description and all that detail. You have to concentrate too hard, right? And it's not fun to read. It doesn't transport you.
Yeah.
So replace some of that detail with the narrator's thoughts, and that will actually transport your reader, the subjective writing.
I'm curious to hear your response to this. I'm an author, I'm writing, I'm trying to set a scene to put you into this scene so that I can lead you through my plot and bring you into the story. So, for example, like my grandmother, she would bake pies. Okay, when she baked pies, she did everything by hand, everything by scratch, and she would make multiple types of pies at once. So it'd be apple, pumpkin, blueberry, cherry, strawberry, like at the same time. And there would be like 30 different pies cooling all around the kitchen. So I, as a memory as a kid, would walk into the kitchen and there would be the smell of pies. The bell is going off because the oven's, the pie's ready to come out. There's the kind of the dampness on the window because everything is kind of warm in the kitchen. And there's just the smell and the feeling and the heat in the room. And she's just whistling and having fun baking. So as I create that scene for people, I could tell you the color of the cupboards, what she's wearing, what time of day it is. I could give you all this detail, which would be kind of like, do I need to know all that? But what about me just saying, I walked into my grandmother's kitchen while she's making pie. Now, instead of me putting you into my world as a reader, maybe I just lead you gently into your memory of your grandmother in her kitchen. So you don't have to picture yourself in my story, but I'm leading you to kind of picture your own story and place yourself in your situation that brings up memories for you. Is that something we can do through our storytelling?
Yes. This was something, it took me a long time to learn. And once I learned it, it still perplexes me. I don't know why it's true. I just know that it works. The more personal you make your writing, the more universal it becomes. And I've learned this with my students. I've had students whose stories I really didn't relate to at all. Their lives had nothing in common with my own. And it happened several times. And one writer whose life had nothing in common with my own, she had two things that really, she married an extremely wealthy man in Australia. So it was kind of a trophy wife and was very into plastic surgery. So that I didn't really relate to. And the other thing was that she'd been a heroin junkie. And so this was another thing I didn't relate to. So these two extremes, I don't relate to either aspects of her. Her writing was so good. It was so personal, especially about being a drug addict, that I saw myself in her story because I've not been a drug addict, but I felt out of place. I felt desperate. And so her story was not my own, but the writing was so good and so personal that I knew what it was like to be a heroin junkie. And I saw myself in the story because I'd felt the same emotions that she had felt. And that is what good writing does. So this writer in particular taught me the more personal you make your writing, the more universal it is. Because there are only so many emotions a human being can feel, really, right? And so the experience might be different, but I've felt those same emotions in my life in a different circumstance. So I do feel like I'm being transported, and I know what it's like to be a heroin junkie, even if I haven't had that experience. But I do relate it to my own life. The reason I understand what it's like to be a heroin junkie is because I have felt desperate. I have felt scared. I have felt like no one understands me.
And that goes back to the wild that you talked about before, the fact that this story is not just about hiking. It's about someone overcoming something. And that's something that's universal to all of us. So whether you like hiking or not, the story is still going to serve you.
So it may be, I love the idea of it's a wonderful image of your grandmother and her pies. And if you and I were working together on writing this scene, absolutely. I don't necessarily need to know what your grandmother was wearing or what the weather was like or the color of the wall, or maybe. But I think, so what writers do is they write a little bit of everything because that's what they remember, especially memoir writers. Instead, I would focus on the pies. Really, what are those pies like? And what do the pies mean? What are you feeling in that moment? What is this moment like? This relationship with your grandmother is probably where the heart of the story is. So there's this rich moment of smelling the pies, great. But really, what I care about is your relationship with your grandmother and what you're thinking in that moment. What it's like. That's what I'd probably interview you if you hadn't yet written your scene, and that would be the heart of your scene. Not a little bit of everything. It's really, the scene is about this moment with my grandmother.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because I came back to her, that's my earliest memories when I was little. I came back to her when I was 18, and the two of us worked together, and she taught me how to do what she does. So now I can make her pies. I have her pans with her name on the bottom in my house. And I am now the guy that makes the pies. My wife is going to contest that and say that she makes more pies than I do. But I do know how to make my grandmother's recipes, and I have her handwritten recipe cards with her handwriting on it on how to do what she does. So that's my memory now, and that's part of me, right? Yeah. That I can now replicate to a lesser degree the amount that she could do. I can do what she can do, and that's part of my story, right?
And are you going to write this, Dave?
Well, it sounds like I'm writing it with you.
Story.
I'm writing it with you right now. I love this.
Yeah, I love it. It sounds like a really beautiful story. So your story doesn't have to be out of this world. You don't have to have climbed Mount Everest. You don't even have to have hiked the PCT like Cheryl Strayed and Wild. You can make pies with your grandmother, and it can be a really beautiful story.
Yeah, I love anytime I can interact with any type of content, a book, audio, anything that puts me into the story, where I don't feel like I'm watching from as a spectator, far from the action. You think of a sporting event way up in the stands. You get people are really small on the field. When I'm on the field and I'm part of it, I can see it, smell it. My senses are heightened, and I feel like I'm in the story. I just love that feeling. For me, that's a great story that I will remember, because I was there, even though it didn't happen to me personally. I just love that connection with a great author when they write that way.
Absolutely. That's called transporting your reader. You forget you're reading a story. You become the main character. I am in that kitchen with all of these different flavors of pie, making pies with my grandmother, because I've become you.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. The one thing that you do as well, which I love, again, we kind of alluded to my musical background, but you have a musical sense to how you help authors. So there's something about what you do where music kind of ties in a little bit. So I'm kind of interested, like we can kind of unpack that a little bit more, because we've talked about it here a little bit, but what do you see as a connection, a correlation between music and writing for an author beyond the practice of just doing the work and learning? There's something special about how music kind of overlaps into the author world. What do you think it is for you as an author?
So for me, the comparison I would draw is that just like a musician, you need to learn the principles. Yeah. That would be for me. No one handed you a guitar and said, Dave, just play guitar. But they do that with writers. They say, just write a crappy first draft. So I think the parallel is there between music and writing, that there are principles to learn. And if you do that, you get your blisters, and then you practice, and then you become better. So that's how I see it, as being similar to music.
What about pacing as an author? Because in music, we have pacing. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts around pacing in a story. When you want to make the story move fast, because you want to have that anxious feeling for a reader, and then you want it to slow down. Yeah. Right? So talk about pacing a little bit.
So I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to qualify it. So yes, absolutely. First I'll qualify it. So the only thing about pacing is that there's a lot written about pacing, and it frustrates me. And the reason it frustrates me is because it is a detail. People are so worried about their pacing, and they don't have plot. And so the pacing is very important, but it would be a little bit like teaching a musician pacing before they'd learn how to read music, or before they could play a single chord. So pacing is so important, Dave. And you're like, yeah, but how do I play a chord? Where do my fingers go on this neck, right? And so, yes, it is, but it's one of the things that you learn last. It's one of the finer points. So it's important, but you could probably still write a good book that had plot is where people get things off track. So let's talk about pacing, but in the scheme of things, that's not where you start. You start with plot. That's why these steps are so important, to do things, big stuff first. And then little by little, this is one of the details. So pacing absolutely would be very similar to music in shorter sentences, create tension. I'm working with a writer now, and she has a car accident scene. And so the sentences need to be shorter. Absolutely. To create drama, there's this tension, anxiety happening. The other problem I see, though, is people, sometimes they can be very logical in a moment in which you're not logical. So I'm working with this writer. She's a fabulous person and a fabulous writer, but her thoughts are very logical as the car is coming toward them and about to smash them. And I'm saying to her, I don't think that part of your brain is active right now, that you're logically analyzing what's happening. So we've worked on her pace and we've made the sentences shorter, but here's where it varies from music. We need sort of this irrational thinking going on. When something dramatic is about to happen, you're not being very logical. So not only does the pacing of your sentences need to change, they become shorter, but the thoughts you're having are changing. That's where my music analogy breaks down. I don't know what the comparison would be.
So for me in music, I've always said to anybody that I'm teaching music to, that the beauty of music happens between the notes, in the silence. That's where music really breathes. And so when you listen to a really amazing musician or instrumentalist, there's this tension, this ebb and flow in their music. It's not all the same all the way through. Like, this constant, there's ups and downs, there's peaks and valleys, and then there's these gaps, these parts, where as a listener, you have a chance to catch up to what's happening in the music, which is kind of like a refresher, kind of a reset during the song. So I just think as authors, we can also then feed a little reset time, a little space between the characters and their thoughts while they're thinking. Everything doesn't have to be like so bang, 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 bang all the way through. You need to let your readers breathe a little bit, just like that would happen in music.
I like what you're saying. Here's the comparison I would draw. I would really draw the comparison between the silence, the space between the notes, as you call it. Giving them that ebb and flow for me is the difference between objective and subjective writing. And objective is what is happening, what you're seeing, the flavors, the color of the pie, the sheen on the pie, and what you're actually thinking, what you're thinking about your grandmother in that moment. So what you're thinking is the subjective writing. So too much of just describing the pie and the room is really overwhelming and makes your reader concentrate too hard. And it gives them a break to let them have your thoughts. What are you thinking in that moment? That is the finding the balance between those two, I think, would be the comparison. It would be similar to what you're talking about in music.
See? And that's why I love having you here, Wendy, because we're kind of going back and forth with this. I like this ebb and flow of just our conversation. This is great.
I love it. Yeah, I love the comparison. I think there are comparisons between different art forms. And I don't play music at all. Dave, I'm terrible. It's like the one art form I really have no talent. So I love it. Well, though most of my friends have been musicians.
Well, you can play the radio, so that you can do that. So that's good. There you go. I like it. Talk to us about the book too. Like, the book is coming out. When is the book coming out for us as readers?
The book comes out on January 11th, 2025.
That birthday, that date sounds familiar to some other dates that are happening possibly in around that time.
It's a day before your wife's birthday. Go. It's a day before your wife's birthday.
There you go, Jen. So there you go. So that's exciting. What's the big launch plan for the book? What are you doing to get out there beyond being on my podcast and other shows? What are you doing to kind of promote this so people can fall in love with you and be a part of the launch?
I was going to say, you're it, Dave. No pressure.
No pressure. I love it.
So Yes, I'm appearing on multiple podcasts. I also have a YouTube channel, so you can find me there. I'll be talking a little bit about the book on the YouTube channel. And yeah, selling the book will be available on Amazon and in bookstores. So
It's amazing. So tell us about the website again, so we can go there and follow your journey. And then I have one kind of question to wrap up our conversation today. I really appreciate you being here. But send us to the website. Where do we go? We'll have links in the notes on the phone as well. People can click through. But tell us about the website. What are we going to see when we get there?
So the website, you can go to freememoirclass.com, which will take you to my main website. The actual direct address is geniusmemoirwriting.com. What you'll find at the website, so you can sign up and get that free 7-part class on how to structure your memoir. There's also information on structure and prose, lots of videos from my YouTube channel on the website. But I really do, the free class will really help. It really is. It will help you write a book with no structural errors from the ground up. So it's 7-part video class. That's where I suggest people go.
Excellent. Now I'm on your website and I'm seeing, can you please just give me a little bit as we wrap up, because I want to highlight this. It mentions here a co-writer on Emmy-nominated TV special, The New Adventures of Mother Goose. Okay, wait a minute. I can't let that one go. Tell me more about this. It's on your site. I want to know. Come on.
So long ago. I'm gonna take it off, Dave. No, it was yes, when I was in my 20s, I was a young screenwriter in Los Angeles. And yes, there was a TV show. This is really gonna date me. You and I, Dave, are similar in age here. Starring Sally Struthers and Emmanuel Lewis.
Yes.
Do you remember Emmanuel Lewis from Webster?
Yes. I love it.
Yes. So yes, this was in my early 20s. It was a TV show that I co-wrote. So.
Well, hey, it's not bragging if you've done it. So I love that. So that's amazing. Yeah. So I'm excited now to send people to you, Wendy, and as well, beyond the book, which we're excited to get our hands on. I'm going to be excited to get my copy. Working with you. Can you just give us a quick overview before we leave? We sign up to work with you. We want to work with you as our coach to kind of lead us and give us some advice or time with you. Can you tell us, what does that look like? Do you have different ways that we can work with you through your website?
Yeah. So absolutely. Really, because I really have always felt like a memoir writing teacher. Okay. I love concepts. I love principles. So we do have a coaching program where everything starts with teaching you concepts, right? So whether you want to buy videos, video courses, their concepts, if you want our help, my help along with my coaches, then we help you implement the concepts that we're teaching you. So the concepts you apply directly to writing your book. So we have video classes as well as coaching programs, but it all starts with the concepts. And if you want help applying the concepts and you want feedback to see if you're applying them the right way to writing a book with no structural errors, if your prose is working to transport your reader, then we have coaching programs as well. We have 3-month coaching programs and 6-month coaching programs. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm on your website and your coaching tab, your coaching plans look delicious. I got to tell you, I'm in. I love cheesecake. I love creme brulee. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like all in. So well done on there. I love that.
Yes, I named all of my coaching programs after desserts, because who doesn't love dessert, right? And yes, our fancy long-term coaching program had to be a French name, creme brulee. So we have creme brulee, cheesecake, brownie, chocolate chip. So yes, pick your dessert.
So now you need to add one more, and that will be pie after our conversation today, right?
We do, yes. We'll have the Dave pie plan that day. Well, and we'll work on that. We'll
work on that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wendy, thank you so much for making time for this. Again, the fact that some guy in Canada can talk to an amazing author in Peru. I've been so amazed with the internet and all this great stuff. This is so cool that we can connect with each other. And for you to share so much great information with us. You have given us so much today that everyone needs to go buy the book just because of all the information you've given us to support you. And I'm asking everyone listening, when you buy the book for yourself or your friends and family, is to leave an amazing review for Wendy as well. wherever you purchase the book, because I want more people to know about this and how it's going to help them. So beyond great book, great author, give some specific details about why this book means so special to you as a reader, so that other people will fall in love with it as well. And then share the episode so people hear Wendy in person talking about what she does, how she helps authors. And if you're interested in writing a memoir, I think you just got a masterclass from Wendy today for free. So please reach out to Wendy and let her know how much you appreciate her and all that she does. And if you need coaching, then you know where to go. So we'll have all the links in the show notes for that. Wendy, parting words as we leave?
Thank you so much, Dave. Really. They say all Canadians are nice, but I think I've met one of the nicer ones. So thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Everyone, all information as always in the show notes. Wendy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad you stayed all the way to the end. You're my new bestie. And the one thing I like to do with my besties is enjoy time together over a cup of coffee. Now, one thing missing in the equation is my coffee cup is empty. And what I would love if, after 390 plus episodes roughly, if you found any value in the podcast and you want to say, hey, Dave, do you need a refill of your coffee cup? I'm looking at it right now, and you know what? It's looking kind of sad. There's not much in the coffee cup. If you want to help support the podcast, I would love you forever as besties and celebrate coffee with you. You can celebrate and support the show at our website using our Buy Me a Coffee link. And all the money goes back into the podcast. And we also like to give it to other podcasters. So if you want to support the show, head over to livingthenextchapter.com and let's top it up. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.